"Confess, and I may persuade the Queen to spare your life," the Duke of Ashcombe told his wife. Behind him, his younger sister wore Eleanor's golden embroidery scissors at her waist. They had been a gift from Queen Charlotte after Eleanor restored the damaged lace on a royal christening gown. Now, Lady Beatrice rested one hand upon them, as if they had always belonged to her. Eleanor stood in the centre of the palace needlework chamber, while two royal guards watched the door. Upon the long oak table lay the missing ceremonial lace, the piece intended to border the Queen's silver jubilee mantle. Its theft was not merely an embarrassment. Because the lace incorporated emblems reserved for the crown, possessing or copying it without permission could be treated as an act against the sovereign. "It was found inside your locked cabinet," Ashcombe continued. "Two servants saw you leave the royal chapel carrying a parcel of the same size. And you believe them?" "I believe the evidence." "No," Eleanor held his gaze. "You believe whichever answer protects your sister." Beatrice drew a wounded breath. "Richard, you promised she would not be permitted to threaten me again." The Duke's expression hardened. 6 years of marriage had taught Eleanor what that tightening jaw meant. Richard was no longer listening. He was preparing to defend a decision already made. Eleanor looked down at the lace. The cream silk had been artificially darkened to resemble an older royal piece. Seed pearls formed roses, crowns, and curling vines along its border. It was an accomplished imitation good enough to deceive a courtier, a magistrate, perhaps even the Queen's chamberlain. But Eleanor had grown up above her father's weaving rooms in Spitalfields. Before she could read, she had learned to distinguish Flemish thread from English silk by touch. At 9, she could identify a careless hand from the tension of a single knot. At 14, she had corrected designs for craftsmen twice her age. And Gideon Shaw had taught her how frightened weavers spoke when ordinary words were too dangerous. Hidden between the crowns was a row of tiny moths. Their wings were no larger than grains of barley. To anyone else, they appeared decorative. Eleanor knew better. Gideon used moths to mark work made under threat, because a moth looked harmless while warning that something precious was being consumed in darkness. She bent closer without touching the evidence. Gideon did not write the account book found with this lace. Beatrice's fingers closed around the golden scissors. Ashcombe noticed the movement. For one brief moment, his eyes dropped to his sister's hand. "The book bears his signature," he said. "Then it was copied. By whom?" "The person who needed a dead man to accuse me." Beatrice turned toward her brother. "You see, even now she invents accusations. Gideon Shaw died in the mill fire. His body was identified by his wedding ring." "His ring was identified," Eleanor corrected. "His body was not." Silence settled over the chamber. The Duke's face changed, though only slightly. He knew Beatrice had visited the ruined Ashcombe mill on the night before the fire. She had claimed she went there to purchase lace for a gown and had returned after midnight with soot on her sleeve. Eleanor had asked Richard to investigate. He had refused, insisting that public questions would damage his unmarried sister's reputation. That had been his opportunity to choose the truth. Now he stepped away from it again. "My sister has endured enough of your suspicions," he said. "Captain, take the Duchess to the Eastern apartments. She will remain there until the royal hearing." Eleanor's breath caught, but she would not beg before Beatrice. "You are surrendering me to save her from one question. I am preserving this family from further disgrace. You are handing this family to the person who created it." Beatrice crossed the room and unlocked Eleanor's work cabinet with a key that should never have left Richard's possession. Inside, every royal pattern had been removed. Eleanor stared at the empty shelves. Those designs were more dangerous than the stolen lace. Several contained arrangements of crowns, flowers, and heraldic animals that identified royal marriages, diplomatic alliances, and disputed claims of inheritance. In the wrong hands, a copied emblem could authenticate a false proclamation or implicate the crown in a secret agreement. The theft accusation was not the true crime. It was the means by which someone had removed Eleanor before she discovered what else had been taken. A bell rang beyond the corridor. Once, twice. Then the palace courtyard erupted with shouting. A guard hurried into the chamber, his face drained of colour. "Your Grace, a man has forced his way through the outer gate." Ashcombe turned sharply. "What man?" "He says his name is Gideon Shaw." Beatrice stumbled backward. The golden scissors struck the stone wall with a metallic click. "That is impossible," she whispered. Eleanor watched her instead of the guard. Beatrice did not look astonished. She looked terrified. Boots thundered in the passage. Moments later, 2 guards carried a gaunt man into the chamber. His coat was scorched, one side of his face was blistered, and his hands were wrapped in blood-soaked linen. Clutched against his chest was a charred bundle of unfinished lace. Gideon lifted his head. His gaze found Eleanor first, then shifted toward the scissors at Beatrice's waist. "The Duchess stole nothing," he rasped. Beatrice turned to flee, but Ashcombe caught her wrist. Gideon collapsed to his knees. Eleanor moved toward him, only for a guard to block her path. "There is another workshop," Gideon gasped. "Beneath the old dye house." Eleanor saw a familiar pattern through the burned folds in his arms. 4 moths encircling a broken crown. It was not a warning about stolen lace. It was a warning about a planned death within the royal household. "Who is in danger?" Eleanor demanded. Gideon's wounded hand rose and pointed toward the private wing of the palace. "The woman wearing the real Jubilee lace," he whispered. "She will be dead before sunset." Eleanor turned toward the windows. The sun had already crossed the highest palace chimney. Fewer than 5 hours remained before sunset. "Who is wearing the real lace?" Ashcombe demanded. Gideon tried to answer, but his body folded forward. Eleanor dropped beside him before the guard could stop her. The linen around his right hand was wet with fresh blood, yet the burns along his face were several weeks old. Someone had kept him alive after the mill fire and had recently injured him to prevent him from working. "He needs a physician," she said. "He needs to identify his accomplices," Beatrice replied. Eleanor looked up sharply. "He has barely spoken, and you have already called them accomplices." Beatrice went pale. Ashcombe heard the mistake. His grip remained around his sister's wrist, but Eleanor watched uncertainty enter his eyes. Captain Harcourt sent 1 guard for the royal physician and another to close the palace gates. Gideon was lifted onto the long work table. As the charred bundle slipped from his arms, Eleanor caught it before it touched the floor. The lace inside was not finished. 4 black moths surrounded a crown, split neatly down the center. Beneath them ran a border of pale blue, bell-shaped flowers. Eleanor recognized the combination. "Nightshade," she said. Ashcombe moved closer. "Those are flowers. They are a message. Gideon and I designed a system years ago for girls who could not safely speak before their employers. Moths meant coercion. A broken crown meant danger to a member of the royal family. Blue bells stitched upside down meant poison." Beatrice gave a brittle laugh. "How convenient that only you can read it. Not only me." Eleanor turned the lace over and showed the underside to Captain Harcourt. Every silk colour had been tied with a different knot. "These marks were taught at the school attached to my London workshop. 40 girls can confirm their meaning." "Your school now falls under Beatrice's supervision," Ashcombe said quietly, "because you transferred it to her this morning." The full consequence of his decision finally seemed to reach him. By removing Eleanor, he had also placed every trained witness under his sister's authority. Beatrice pulled free from his grasp. "This is absurd. The Queen's mantle has not yet been completed. No woman could be wearing its lace." "The missing piece was never intended for the mantle," Eleanor said. That was merely the explanation given to the court. She examined the unfinished border. The blue flowers faced toward a repeated emblem of 3 feathers surrounded by pearls. The symbol belonged to only 1 woman in the palace, the Princess of Wales. Captain Harcourt swore beneath his breath. The princess was attending a private musicale that afternoon. Her silver court gown had been altered for the occasion, and the Queen had ordered a length of antique lace brought from the royal chapel to complete it. The lace, allegedly found in Eleanor's cabinet, was a copy. The original must already be on the princess's gown. "We must stop the musicale," Eleanor said. Ashcombe nodded to Harcourt. "Do it." The captain did not move. "Your Grace, the Duchess stands accused of stealing the same lace she now claims has been poisoned. If we interrupt a royal gathering on her word alone, we may cause panic and give her an opportunity to destroy evidence." Eleanor understood his hesitation. Beatrice had arranged the accusation carefully. Any warning Eleanor gave could be presented as another part of her crime. "Then do not act on my word," she said. "Bring me the Queen's wardrobe register." Beatrice stepped between her and the door. "Those records are restricted. They were under my care until your brother removed me, and now they are under mine." Eleanor faced her husband. This is the choice before you, Richard. Not whether you trust me, whether you will allow the woman who benefits from my arrest to control the evidence. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he held out his hand to Beatrice. The key. Her lips parted. You promised to defend me. I promised you would not be condemned without proof. I did not promise to close my eyes. It was not an apology. It did not undo his accusation or restore Eleanor's authority. But it was the first small fracture in Beatrice's control. She surrendered the key. The wardrobe register was found in the adjoining records room. Eleanor opened it upon a writing desk and searched the entries for that morning. The line recording the Jubilee lace appeared correct until she examined the ink beneath the window. The final destination had been altered. Someone had scraped away the words "Princess's dressing room" and written "Duchess of Ashcombe's cabinet" above them. Eleanor touched neither inscription. My father taught me to compare ink by the light it reflects. The original entry dried yesterday. The alteration is less than 2 hours old. Captain Harcourt leaned closer. Who had access to this book? The keeper of the needlework, Eleanor answered. Every eye turned toward Beatrice. She raised her chin. I inherited a disorderly department. Any servant might have taken my key. A weak sound came from the work table. Gideon had regained consciousness. Not her key, he whispered. The red key. Beatrice froze. Eleanor knew every palace key assigned to the embroidery rooms. None was red. Gideon struggled to lift his bandaged hand. Something hard pressed beneath the bloodied cloth. Eleanor carefully loosened one fold and found the imprint of a small, toothed object burned into his palm. A key had been heated and forced against his skin. It opens the room beneath the old dye house, Gideon said. They kept 6 of us there. We copied the royal patterns, but the poisoned lace was made by someone else. Who? Eleanor asked. Before he could answer, music began beyond the courtyard. The musicale had already started. Then a young palace maid rushed into the records room, carrying a silver sewing box. She dropped into a curtsy, shaking so badly that the box rattled in her hands. Your Grace, this was delivered for Lady Beatrice. Beatrice lunged toward it. Eleanor reached it first. Inside lay a red-painted key, a spool of blue silk, and a freshly cut lock of a young woman's hair. Wrapped around the hair was a note. Bring Eleanor to the dye house alone, or the next body will belong to one of her schoolgirls. Eleanor read the note twice. The handwriting had been disguised with crude block letters, but the paper carried the faint scent of boiled starch used in weaving rooms. One corner was pierced by a narrow, triangular hole, as though it had once been pinned to a pattern board. Which girl? She asked the maid. I do not know, Your Grace. A boy left the box at the servants' entrance and ran. Ashcombe took the lock of hair from Eleanor. It was dark brown and tied near one end with yellow cotton thread. Half the girls at your school have hair this colour, but only the junior apprentices use yellow thread to label their practice bundles. Eleanor closed the box. Whoever sent this has access to the school. Beatrice backed toward the doorway. You place those girls under my protection, she told her brother. If one has disappeared, Eleanor will blame me, regardless of the truth. You dismissed the school matron this morning, Eleanor said. Who replaced her? Beatrice did not answer. Ashcombe's voice sharpened. Who? Mrs. Wren. She has experience managing factory girls. Eleanor knew the name. Miriam Wren had once supervised children at the Ashcombe mill. 3 apprentices had lost fingers there before Eleanor persuaded Richard to dismiss her. Beatrice had restored the very woman Eleanor had removed. Because Ashcombe had transferred the school without examining its records, Mrs. Wren now controlled the doors, attendance books, and sleeping quarters. Send riders to the school, Eleanor told Captain Harcourt. No child is to leave with Mrs. Wren. Harcourt glanced toward the distant music. My duty is to the royal family. Then protect the princess, Eleanor replied. Give me 1 minute with that sewing box, and I will tell you whether she is already wearing the poisoned lace. Beatrice laughed again, but no one joined her. Eleanor lifted the spool of blue silk. Its wooden core had been darkened with soot, and a small brass disc sealed one end. She removed a pin from the maid's cap and pressed it into a shallow groove. The disc sprang loose. A dusting of pale powder fell onto the silver lining. Captain Harcourt reached for it. Do not touch it. Eleanor placed a sheet of black pattern paper beneath the spool and tapped it once. the powder scattered in tiny grey crystals rather than soft grains. "This is not dye," she said. "It has been mixed with ground glass." Ashcombe's face tightened. "Poison? Perhaps, but it was not intended to be swallowed." She examined the fibres around the spool. Several were stiff and glossy, coated with a clear substance. "My father supplied cloth to theatrical costumers. He taught me that certain compounds may be worked into fabric and released by warmth or moisture. If this mixture is on the royal lace, the heat of the wearer's skin could loosen it." Captain Harcourt immediately ordered the musicale stopped and sent a female attendant to prevent anyone from touching the princess's gown. He then dispatched 2 mounted guards to Eleanor's school. It was a small victory, but Eleanor took no comfort in it. Someone had expected her to understand the warning. The sewing box was not merely evidence, it was bait designed specifically for her. Gideon stirred upon the table. "The princess is not the only target," he whispered. "The pattern was changed after we made it." "By whom?" "A woman who never removed her gloves. Mrs. Wren called her the patroness." Beatrice's expression altered so quickly that another observer might have missed it. Her fear vanished, replaced by calculation. Eleanor did not accuse her. Not yet. "Did the patroness speak to you?" she asked. "Once. She said the crown had forgotten what it owed her family." That motive reached beyond Beatrice's resentment. Someone wanted more than Eleanor's position or the Duke's protection. The copied emblems could support a political claim, and the poisoned lace might eliminate the woman standing closest to the succession. The palace physician arrived and began treating Gideon. Eleanor returned to the silver sewing box. A commonplace item lay beneath the empty spool. A bone button, plain, except for 4 holes. Eleanor. She had seen hundreds like it in the school storeroom. This one carried a smear of green wax around its edge. Eleanor wrapped it in a clean square of paper and handed it to Harcourt. "Seal this in my presence. Record where it was found and allow no one to clean it." Beatrice scoffed. "It is a button. It may tell us who packed the box." Captain Harcourt followed Eleanor's instructions, writing the hour and location across the folded paper before sealing it with his signet. The button appeared worthless, which made it precisely the sort of object a guilty person would overlook. Ashcombe moved closer to Eleanor. "I will accompany you to the dye house." "No, your life has been threatened. The note demands that I go alone, and you intend to obey?" "I intend to make them believe I have." His eyes searched her face. Once, before pride and family obligation had poisoned their marriage, Richard had trusted her judgment without requiring her to soften it. The memory passed between them, painful because it no longer offered safety. "You are still under royal confinement," he said, "and the girls are still under the authority you gave Beatrice. If your order costs a child her life, will you call that evidence too?" He flinched. Captain Harcourt returned from the corridor. The Princess of Wales had been removed from the musicale unharmed. Her attendants had discovered no immediate illness, but the antique lace sewn to her neckline carried a blue residue. The real piece had been found. Eleanor had been proven correct about the substitution, but Harcourt did not release her. "The theft charge remains," he said. "The poisoned lace might still be part of a scheme arranged by the Duchess." Beatrice seized upon his words. "Of course it is. She created that secret language herself. Every moth and broken crown leads back to her." Eleanor turned toward Gideon. "Who ordered you to place the moths in the imitation?" "No one," he said. "I added them after Mrs. Wren left the room." That testimony gave Eleanor a witness, but not freedom. Gideon was officially dead, injured, and connected to an illegal workshop. Her enemies would attack his credibility before he reached a hearing. Hoofbeats sounded in the courtyard. One of the guards sent to the school rushed inside. His coat was torn, and blood marked his forehead. "The building is empty," he reported. "Mrs. Wren took every girl before we arrived." Eleanor's composure finally cracked. 40 girls? 39. We found one child locked inside the coal cupboard. A small figure appeared behind him, wrapped in a guard's cloak. Lucy Bell was 12 years old, slight and solemn, with dark hair cut unevenly above one ear. The lock in the sewing box had come from her. Lucy ran to Eleanor and buried her face against her gown. "Mrs. Wren said you had confessed," the child sobbed. "She said, Lady Beatrice ordered us moved for our protection." Beatrice recoiled. "I gave no such order." Lucy looked up at her. "Yes, my lady, you did." From inside her sleeve, she pulled a folded transfer notice bearing Beatrice's signature and the Duke of Ashcombe's seal. Ashcombe stared at the imprint. He had handed that seal to his sister only hours earlier. Now, 39 children had vanished under its authority. Ashcombe took the transfer notice with both hands. The seal was unmistakably his. A lion stood above 3 crossed arrows, and a hairline crack divided the lowest arrowhead. That defect had appeared 2 years earlier, when Richard dropped the signet upon a marble hearth. No clerk could have mistaken this impression, Captain Harcourt said. "The order carries ducal authority. I did not sign it," Ashcombe replied. Eleanor looked at the ink. "But someone possessing your seal did." Beatrice's hand moved instinctively toward the pocket of her gown. Ashcombe saw it. "Give it to me." Her eyes filled with tears. "Richard, surely you cannot believe I abducted 39 children." The seal. She withdrew the heavy gold signet and placed it in his palm. "I used it only for the school appointment and the inventory orders you approved. Who else touched it? My secretary may have done so. Several servants entered my rooms. Eleanor's attendants still move freely through this palace." Once again, Beatrice pushed suspicion toward Eleanor. This time, however, Richard did not immediately accept it. Lucy gripped Eleanor's skirt. "Where did Mrs. Wren say she was taking the girls to?" Eleanor asked. "To a house with blue doors. She told us we would sew dresses for the royal celebration." "Did you see the carriages?" Lucy nodded. 3 black coaches and a green wagon. The wagon had bells beneath it. Beatrice waved one hand impatiently. "Children invent details when frightened." "Lucy does not," Eleanor said. She crouched to the girl's height. "Why were you locked in the coal cupboard?" "I would not leave without my thimble. It belonged to my mother. Mrs. Wren said I was delaying everyone, and she pulled my hair." Lucy touched the uneven locks beside her cheek. "When I bit her, she cut it off and put me in the cupboard." The lock of hair inside the sewing box had not proved that Lucy was a captive. It had made Eleanor believe she was. Mrs. Wren had used the missing hair to create an immediate threat, never expecting anyone to reach the school soon enough to find the child alive. Eleanor held Lucy's hands. "You were brave. Now I need you to remember the sounds you heard." "The carriages went east." "How do you know?" "The chapel clock was behind them when it struck 2. Captain Harcourt moved toward the door. "I will send men along the eastern road." "Wait," Eleanor said. "That is where they want you to search." She asked Lucy to describe the bells beneath the wagon. The girl tapped 4 uneven beats against Eleanor's palm. Eleanor recognized the rhythm. They were not harness bells. They were metal bobbins striking together. Her father's workshop had used covered wagons fitted with hanging bobbins to transport silk. On ordinary roads, they chimed whenever the wheels passed over stones. But the sound Lucy imitated contained long pauses between each group of strikes. "The wagon crossed wooden planks," Eleanor said. "Not the eastern road." Ashcombe unfolded a map of the palace district. "There are bridges in every direction. Not bridges of that length, loading platforms." She traced the streets leading south from the school toward the Thames. Near Blackfriars stood an abandoned riverside warehouse, once used by Ashcombe's textile merchants. Its doors had been painted blue to distinguish imported silk from domestic cloth. The Duke's face darkened. That warehouse was closed after the mill fire. "Who controlled it afterward?" Harcourt asked. Ashcombe did not answer immediately. "Beatrice did. The property was placed under my supervision." Eleanor rose. "Mrs. Wren did not take the girls east. She circled the chapel so they would lose direction, then carried them south to the river." Captain Harcourt dispatched men before Beatrice could object. For one moment, Eleanor felt hope. She had turned a child's memory into a location, and perhaps saved the apprentices from being taken aboard a boat. Then Beatrice stepped into the corridor and cried loudly enough for nearby courtiers to hear. "My sister-in-law has admitted knowing the route used by the kidnappers." Heads appeared at doorways. She knew the wagons, the warehouse, even the color of its doors, Beatrice continued. How could she know so much unless she arranged it? Eleanor understood the tactic. Beatrice could not conceal Eleanor's success, so she transformed expertise into guilt. Within minutes, the story spread through the palace. The accused Duchess had directed guards to a secret workshop belonging to her husband's family. No one repeated that Beatrice controlled the building. No one mentioned that Ashcombe's seal had authorized the removal of the children. A royal secretary entered with a written command from the Queen. Until the theft, poisoning, and disappearances were resolved, Eleanor was forbidden to approach the princess or leave the palace without armed supervision. Captain Harcourt read the order aloud. Eleanor felt Lucy trembling beside her. If the girl were questioned publicly, Beatrice's allies would call her disobedient, dishonest, or coached. Lucy must not be placed in the servants' quarters, Eleanor said. Mrs. Wren may have accomplices there. She is a witness, Harcourt replied. She must remain available. Then place her in my apartments. You are a prisoner, and she is a child. Eleanor removed the pearl necklace from her throat and placed it on the table. It was the last valuable object still under her direct control. Accept this as security against my conduct. If Lucy disappears, charge me. If I attempt to flee, seize it for the crown. But do not leave her where the people who took her friends can reach her. Harcourt hesitated, then agreed. Eleanor had surrendered part of her private fortune, but Lucy would sleep behind a guarded door. The child embraced her. I heard something else, Lucy whispered. Mrs. Wren argued with Lady Beatrice before we left. Beatrice's face sharpened. I was never at the school. Not today, Lucy said. Last night, Lucy described Beatrice's violet carriage and the silver fox handle on its door. She had seen Beatrice enter the headmistress's office carrying a leather pattern case. Mrs. Wren later removed a sheet bearing the emblem of 3 feathers, the symbol of the Princess of Wales. Beatrice denied everything. My carriage remained in the Ashcombe stables all evening. Richard could verify that claim. His head coachman maintained departure times, destinations, wheel repairs, and the names of every driver. Eleanor had once instituted that ledger after Beatrice repeatedly used household carriages without permission. Send for the stable book, Eleanor said. Ashcombe looked from his sister to his wife. If Beatrice's carriage had left, Lucy's account would place her at the school on the eve of the abduction. If it had remained, Eleanor's most important witness would already appear unreliable. Richard called for his head coachman. Beatrice smiled faintly. A quarter of an hour later, the coachman arrived, carrying the stable ledger. He swore that Lady Beatrice's violet carriage had never left Ashcombe House. Then he opened the book to prove it. The entry for the previous night had been cut from the ledger with a blade exactly the width of Eleanor's missing golden scissors. Ashcombe now had the chance to examine the lie before him or protect his sister once again. Ashcombe ran his thumb along the clean edge where the page had been removed. The cut was narrow and precise. Eleanor's golden scissors could have made it, but so could dozens of fine blades within the palace workrooms. Beatrice touched the scissors at her waist. That proves Eleanor had the means to alter the ledger. You are wearing her scissors, Richard said, because you gave me her office. I gave you authority this morning. The page was removed last night. Beatrice's composure faltered. Before Richard could question her further, hurried footsteps sounded in the corridor. The guards, sent to the riverside warehouse, had returned with 39 frightened apprentices. All were alive, but several had bruised wrists, and 2 had been overcome by fumes from the covered wagon. Mrs. Wren had escaped by boat minutes before the soldiers arrived. Captain Harcourt brought 3 girls into the needlework chamber. Each confirmed that Mrs. Wren had ordered them to copy royal patterns at the warehouse, yet none had seen Beatrice there. The woman who supervised the work had concealed her face behind a black veil and worn gloves whenever she handled the lace. Harcourt placed a leather pattern case on the table. We found this in the warehouse. Beatrice stared at it. Lucy had described the same case. Inside were copies of royal emblems, sketches of the Princess of Wales's gown, and an invoice for blue silk addressed to Eleanor. Her signature appeared at the bottom. The imitation was excellent. Eleanor might have doubted herself if not for one small defect. The final stroke of her surname curved inward. Her own hand always carried it outward. The signature was traced, she said. By one of your pupils? Harcourt asked. Perhaps by someone who had access to their practice sheets. Beatrice shook her head sadly. The evidence always belongs to someone else. The cabinet, the book, the warehouse. Every trail leads to Eleanor, yet she explains each trail away. It also leads to properties and servants under your control, Eleanor replied. A royal messenger entered before Beatrice could answer. The Queen had learned that the missing apprentices were connected to Eleanor's school. She now required an immediate formal response from the Duke of Ashcombe. Unless he accepted responsibility for securing the suspected conspirator, royal officers would assume control of his London residence and textile holdings. Richard read the message in silence. Eleanor saw the struggle plainly. If he defended her, he risked his royal appointment, his estates, and the family name he valued above nearly everything. If he condemned her, he could present the scandal as the work of a disobedient wife acting beyond his knowledge. Beatrice approached him carefully. "You cannot allow her crimes to destroy our father's legacy." Eleanor's voice remained calm. "Ask Gideon, who visited the hidden workshop. Question the coachman apart from your sister. Examine the altered ink and the cut page. Give me 1 day." "The Queen may not give me 1 day." "You are not choosing between the Queen and me. You are choosing whether fear permits you to call an accusation the truth." Richard looked toward Gideon. The physician had given him laudanum for the pain, leaving him conscious but unable to speak clearly. No immediate testimony could rescue Eleanor. The Duke turned to Captain Harcourt. "What action would satisfy the Crown?" "A signed declaration surrendering the Duchess to royal custody, together with your textile properties and household records. You must state that she acted without your authority." Beatrice's relief was almost invisible. Richard saw it. Eleanor knew he saw it. Still, he reached for the pen. "Do not do this," she said. "The moment you surrender those properties, every workshop and record will pass beyond my protection. Whoever created the false lace will have access to the entire supply chain. My first duty is to the Crown. Your first duty is to the truth. My duty is not defined by you." The words struck harder because he spoke them without anger. Richard signed the declaration. He gave Captain Harcourt authority to detain Eleanor, search her rooms, seize the school, and place all Ashcombe textile properties under temporary royal administration. He formally affirmed that his wife's work had been conducted without his approval. With one signature, he erased 12 years of her management. More dangerously, he opened every warehouse and workshop to officials who could not distinguish loyal craftsmen from Mrs. Wren's accomplices. Captain Harcourt sealed the document. "You will be removed to the Tower apartments reserved for prisoners of rank." Lucy clung to Eleanor. "No, she promised I could stay with her." Eleanor knelt and held the child's shoulders. "You will remain with the other girls. Tell them not to touch any thread, food, or medicine brought by someone they do not know. I want to come with you." "You cannot." Lucy's face crumpled. Eleanor pressed her forehead briefly against the child's, the restraint she had maintained since the accusation finally broke, and one tear escaped before she could turn away. "Keep your mother's thimble," she whispered. "Whatever they take, keep that." The guards led Eleanor toward the door. Beatrice removed the golden scissors from her waist. "These should be entered as evidence," she told Harcourt. As she laid them upon the table, Eleanor saw green wax caught inside the hinge. The same wax had marked the bone button found in the silver sewing box. Beatrice had handled something connected to the threat. Eleanor stopped. "Seal the scissors separately." Harcourt frowned. "Why?" "The wax in the hinge may identify where the box was packed." Beatrice snatched up a cloth. "It is ordinary dirt." She tried to wipe the blades, but Richard caught her wrist. For a heartbeat, Eleanor believed he would finally stop her. Then a palace bell rang 3 times, the signal that a member of the royal family had fallen ill. A lady in waiting appeared at the far end of the passage. "The Princess of Wales has collapsed." All attention shifted. Beatrice pulled her wrist free and dragged the cloth across the scissors. By the time Harcourt seized them, most of the green wax was gone. The irreversible choice had been made. Eleanor was carried away under guard, while Beatrice remained beside the evidence she had tried to destroy. Halfway across the courtyard, the royal physician ran toward them. "The princess's breathing has stopped," he called. The poison was not only in the lace. Eleanor looked back toward the needlework chamber. Through the open doorway, she saw the blue spool still lying inside the silver box. Its brass core was empty. Whatever it had contained was already somewhere else in the palace. Eleanor stopped so abruptly that the guard behind her nearly struck her shoulder. "Take me to the princess." Captain Harcourt caught up with them. "You are under arrest, and the only person here who recognized how the poison was carried. The physician is with her. The physician believes it entered through the lace. It did not." Harcourt's gaze shifted toward the silver sewing box in the distant chamber. Eleanor had seen no illness when the princess was first removed from the musicale. If the poisoned lace had acted through warmth against the skin, symptoms should have appeared while she wore it. Instead, she had collapsed nearly an hour after the gown had been taken away. Something else had reached her. Ashcombe crossed the courtyard behind the captain. What was inside the brass core? I do not know, Eleanor said, but someone emptied it after Gideon arrived. Search every servant who approached the princess. The palace is full of servants, Harcourt replied. Then ask what changed after the lace was removed. A young attendant hurried from the royal apartments carrying a porcelain basin. Eleanor caught a sharp, floral scent as the woman passed. Stop her. The attendant froze. What is in that basin? Eleanor asked. Water from Her Royal Highness's dressing room. Was anything added to it? Orange blossom, my lady. It calms the nerves. Who prepared it? The attendant looked toward Beatrice, who had followed them into the courtyard. Lady Beatrice recommended it. Beatrice lifted her chin. The princess was distressed. I offered a familiar remedy. Eleanor approached the basin without touching it. A faint blue film floated upon the surface. The silk spool contained crystals, she said. Someone dissolved them in the washing water. Harcourt's face hardened. Remove Lady Beatrice from the royal wing. Richard stepped in front of his sister. She has not been proven guilty. Eleanor could scarcely believe him. Even now, I will not permit an accusation to replace proof merely because it now points toward Beatrice. That principle did not trouble you when the accusation pointed toward me. His face tightened, but there was no time to force him to answer. Eleanor asked for a strip of plain, undyed wool. The attendant produced one from a mending basket. Eleanor lowered it into the basin with a pair of silver tongs, then held it near the flame of a wall lamp. The damp wool released a bitter odor beneath the orange blossom. Bitter almonds, the royal physician said as he arrived. Dear God, can you treat her? Ashcombe asked. If we act at once. Eleanor instructed the attendants to open the windows and remove every scented basin, cloth, and garment from the princess's rooms. The physician administered the remedies available to him, while Eleanor ordered warmed blankets and clean water from a guarded kitchen. She did not pretend to possess medical knowledge she lacked. Her task was to identify the contaminated objects and stop further exposure. Within minutes, a second lady in waiting began to sway. Eleanor tore the embroidered handkerchief from the woman's hand and threw it into an empty brass warming pan. Blue dust scattered across the metal. It has spread beyond the basin. The princess's attendants had used the same handkerchiefs, face cloths, and scented water. Someone had prepared an entire chain of poisoned articles, ensuring that removing the lace would not save her. The crisis had been made possible by Richard's declaration. After he surrendered the textile rooms to royal administration, unfamiliar officials had opened the cupboards and redistributed their contents without Eleanor's supervision. Beatrice's new appointees had moved freely among them. Orders alone could no longer solve the danger because no one knew which fabrics were safe. Evacuate the royal wing, Harcourt commanded. No, Eleanor said. Moving the princess may expose the rest of the palace. Seal this corridor. Bring every textile delivered since morning into the courtyard, but carry each piece with tongs and keep them separated. Harcourt obeyed. For the next hour, Eleanor worked beneath the eyes of the guards who had been ordered to imprison her. She examined ribbons, gloves, napkins, chair covers, and lengths of lace. The contaminated pieces shared one feature, a pale blue silk knot hidden somewhere along the seam. Her warning system had been reversed. The same color she once used to help frightened workers now marked objects intended to kill. The physician finally emerged from the princess's room. She is breathing without assistance. I cannot promise more, but she has survived the immediate attack. Relief weakened Eleanor's knees. She gripped the edge of a table until the courtyard steadied. Richard moved toward her. You saved her. I identified the danger. Others saved her. You did so after I... Do not turn my work into an absolution for your choice. He stopped. Captain Harcourt approached with 2 guards. The princess is alive, but the Queen's officers found a bottle of orange blossom essence in the Duchess's seized apartments. Beatrice's voice carried across the courtyard. There is your proof. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly. The bottle had been placed there before her arrest, just as the false lace had been placed in her cabinet. Harcourt continued. It bears the same blue residue found in the basin. Under the Duke's signed declaration, your apartments and workshops are now treated as the center of the conspiracy. Richard's signature had not protected the Ashcombe name. It had made Eleanor legally isolated and allowed every planted object to be presented without the context only she could supply. A royal secretary brought the Queen's order. At sunrise, Eleanor would face an emergency hearing. If the princess died before then, the charge would be attempted regicide or murder. Captain Harcourt lowered his voice. You have until dawn to give me something stronger than your interpretation of thread. Eleanor looked at the sealed paper containing the bone button. Green wax remained around its edge. Most of the same wax had been wiped from her golden scissors, but not all of it. If she could identify its source, she might connect the sewing box, Beatrice, and the hidden workshop. Let me examine the dye house, she said. You cannot leave royal custody. Then come with me. The palace is in lockdown. Richard stepped forward. Use my carriage and my guards. Harcourt shook his head. Your authority over this investigation ended when you surrendered your properties. The Duke's greatest concrete loss had arrived. By signing Eleanor away, he had also surrendered the power he now needed to help her. Eleanor turned to Gideon, who had been moved onto a stretcher. His eyes opened at the mention of the dye house. The red key, he murmured. There are 2 doors. What lies behind the second? Eleanor asked. Records, names, payments. Where is the door? Below the black vat. His breathing caught. Then he seized Eleanor's sleeve. Mrs. Wren knows I escaped. She will burn everything at midnight. The palace clock struck 7. Sunset reddened the western windows, and Eleanor's hearing would begin at dawn. She had 5 hours to reach a building she was forbidden to enter, rescue whatever evidence remained, and return before the only records capable of clearing her name were reduced to ash. Eleanor looked toward the western windows as the last edge of sunlight disappeared. Captain Harcourt, your order requires that I remain in royal custody. It does not require that I remain inside the palace. Harcourt studied her. You are asking me to take an accused conspirator to the place where she claims the evidence is hidden. I am asking you to witness every step. Search me before we leave. Record the time. Allow me to touch nothing unless you see it first. And if this is a trap, then you will have me surrounded by armed men. Richard moved closer. Let me go with her. Eleanor met his eyes. Only on my conditions. The Duke stiffened at being addressed before servants and guards as a man without automatic authority. Name them. You will give no order concerning me, Gideon, Lucy, or the apprentices. You will not remove an object, question a witness alone, or protect Beatrice from an answer. If your sister's name appears in those records, you will read it. A long silence followed. I agree, he said. Harcourt ordered Eleanor searched by a female attendant. Nothing was found except a plain handkerchief and the key to her private writing desk. The captain then placed her in a guarded carriage with Richard, while Gideon remained at the palace under a physician's care. Eleanor's imprisonment had stripped away her rooms, money, servants, and title within the investigation. Yet as the carriage moved south, she realized that the rescued apprentices had become something Beatrice could not confiscate, people who trusted Eleanor because she had protected them before she needed their testimony. Her authority no longer came from her husband. It came from work already done. The abandoned dye house stood beside the Thames, its upper windows black and broken. Harcourt's men surrounded the building before Eleanor approached the blue doors. The red key opened neither. Gideon said there were 2 doors, Richard said. He did not say both were visible. Eleanor examined the loading platform. Wax drippings marked the planks near a rusted winch. The residue was dark green. Captain Harcourt opened the sealed packet containing the bone button. Its wax matched in color, but color alone could not establish a connection. Eleanor knelt without touching the stain. My father sealed imported silk with green wax during river transport. Most merchants abandoned the practice when paper labels became cheaper. Whoever packed the sewing box used wax from an old textile store. Richard stared at the loading platform. I sold the remaining Ashcombe wax stock 3 years ago. To whom? He hesitated. Eleanor already knew the answer. Beatrice asked for it, he admitted. She said she intended to make decorative seals for charitable invitations. You gave her the wax, the warehouse, my school, and your signet. Each item sounded harmless, alone. Together, they formed the machinery of the crime. Richard looked toward the river. I thought refusing her would confirm that I blamed her for our mother's death. Eleanor had heard that wound used as an explanation for years. Beatrice had been 15 when the old Duchess died following a winter fever. Richard believed his father's harshness had worsened her decline, and he had promised never to abandon his sister as their father had abandoned the family. "You did not protect Beatrice," Eleanor said. "You taught her that your guilt would excuse anything." He absorbed the words without defending himself. Behind the winch, Eleanor found 4 circular depressions in the wall. They resembled the holes of the bone button. "May I see it?" Harcourt held the sealed packet against the marks, but did not break the seal. The spacing matched perfectly. "The button is a diagram," Eleanor said. 4 holes indicate where to press. A guard pushed the stones in the same order as the thread knots on Gideon's warning lace. Part of the wall released with a groan, revealing a narrow stairway. The red key opened the iron door at the bottom. 6 work tables filled the underground chamber. Chains had been fixed to 2 walls. Patterns covered the tables, including copies of royal insignia and the Ashcombe crest. Bundles of letters stood inside a cabinet beside receipts for silk, chemicals, and hired carriages. Harcourt assigned 1 officer to record every object before it was moved. Eleanor examined the papers only after he placed them beneath glass weights. Mrs. Wren's name appeared on payment lists, but Beatrice's did not. Instead, the orders carried a symbol, a small fox above the letter V. "Beatrice's carriage has a silver fox handle," Richard said. "A carriage ornament is not an identity. Yesterday I would have called it coincidence." Eleanor found correspondence addressed to "Our Patroness." The writer promised that once the princess died and Eleanor was condemned, public outrage would force the Queen to abandon a proposed marriage alliance. The author expected political payment from a foreign court. This scheme was larger than a sister's jealousy. Near the bottom of the cabinet lay the original wardrobe register page, removed with Eleanor's scissors. It recorded Beatrice's delivery of the royal lace to the princess's dressing room. Harcourt sealed it immediately. "This places Lady Beatrice within the chain of custody," he said. Richard's face drained of colour. Eleanor discovered something else beneath it. 12 years of workshop accounts in her own handwriting. They documented wages, compensation for injured workers, school expenses, and private payments Eleanor had made from her marriage allowance when Ashcombe funds ran short. Richard turned the pages slowly. "You paid the apprentices during the winter closure. The estate account had been frozen. You told me the school had a private reserve because you were negotiating a government appointment. I knew you would close the school rather than admit the estate lacked ready money." He stared at the totals. Eleanor had preserved both his reputation and the livelihoods of 40 families, then allowed him to believe the achievement was his. "I did not know. You never asked." Harcourt found a smaller ledger inside the black dye vat. The pages recorded payments to guards, servants, and a physician who had falsely identified Gideon's burned body. One final entry promised a large sum after Eleanor's conviction. The recipient was listed only by initials: B.A. Beatrice Ashcombe. It was compelling, but initials could be forged. "We need a witness who saw her authorize these payments," Eleanor said. A floorboard creaked overhead. Harcourt raised one hand. His guards moved toward the stairs. A crash shattered the rear window. Burning liquid poured across the wooden platform above them. Flames raced down the walls. "Take the ledgers," Harcourt shouted. Smoke filled the stairway. One guard seized the wardrobe page. Another carried the payment ledger. Eleanor grabbed nothing, obeying the conditions that protected the evidence from accusations of tampering. They reached the river door as fire consumed the hidden room. A veiled woman stood on the dock beside a waiting boat. Mrs. Wren. She held Lucy by the arm, a knife pressed beneath the child's jaw. "Give me the ledger," she called, "or the girl enters the river." Captain Harcourt stopped. Eleanor saw Lucy's mother's thimble clenched in the child's fist. Behind Mrs. Wren, a second figure lifted a pistol from the boat. The shot struck the guard carrying the payment ledger. He fell against the railing, and the book tumbled from his hands into the black water below. The payment ledger struck the river and vanished beneath the burning reflection of the dye house. Captain Harcourt's men raised their weapons, but Mrs. Wren pressed the knife closer to Lucy's throat. "Lower them." Eleanor stepped onto the dock. "Release the child. You have destroyed the record you came for." "Not all of it," Mrs. Wren looked toward the guard holding the original wardrobe page. "Give me that paper as well." Harcourt's jaw tightened. The page placed Beatrice in the chain of custody, but Lucy's blood already marked the knife. Eleanor met the girl's terrified eyes. "Give it to her." Richard caught Eleanor's arm. "It may be the only proof that survives. Lucy is not evidence to be sacrificed." The words made him release her. Harcourt handed the sealed page to Mrs. Wren. She passed it to the figure in the boat, who held it over a lantern flame. The paper curled, blackened, and scattered across the river. "Now let her go," Eleanor said. Mrs. Wren shoved Lucy forward and jumped aboard. Eleanor caught the child as the boat pulled away. Harcourt's men fired above the water, but the vessel disappeared into smoke and darkness. The hidden chamber collapsed minutes later. Its patterns, letters, and account books burned with it. The guard who had been shot remained alive, but the river had taken the ledger before anyone could recover it. Captain Harcourt returned to the palace, carrying only his officers' written observations, the bone button, and the green wax scraped from the loading platform. They had witnessed the records, yet none had read enough to prove the whole conspiracy. By midnight, Beatrice's supporters had prepared their answer. They claimed Eleanor had led the guards to a building she had secretly controlled. They alleged that she arranged the fire to destroy her own records and hired Mrs. Wren to stage Lucy's abduction. The vanished ledger, they said, had never existed. At the emergency hearing, Beatrice entered dressed in mourning grey. She wept before the Queen's Council and declared that she had trusted her sister-in-law too completely. Eleanor stood under guard, without jewels or rank. The Duchess knew the location of the hidden room, Beatrice said. She understood its signals and possessed its keys. Even the kidnapped child obeys her every instruction. Lucy cried out from the rear of the chamber. "That is a lie!" Beatrice lowered her head with rehearsed sorrow. "You see how Eleanor has influenced her." Captain Harcourt testified that evidence naming Beatrice had been discovered, but the council demanded the documents themselves. His word established suspicion, not guilt. The blue poison found in Eleanor's apartments carried greater weight than wax and a child's recollection. Then, a court official announced that the Princess of Wales had regained consciousness. Relief swept through the chamber, but Eleanor's danger did not end. Attempting to poison a royal woman remained treason, whether the victim survived or not. The presiding minister turned to Ashcombe. "Your Grace, you signed a declaration stating that your wife acted without your knowledge. Do you affirm it?" Beatrice watched her brother. Richard stood beside the council table, stripped of the confidence he had worn that morning. If he withdrew his declaration, he would admit that he had condemned Eleanor without investigation and misled the crown to protect his family's position. His royal appointment would be finished. "No," he said. The chamber fell silent. Richard removed the chain of office from his neck and placed it before the minister. "My declaration was written to preserve my name, not to establish the truth. I knew my sister had visited the Ashcombe mill before the fire. I knew she possessed the warehouse, the school, the green sealing wax, and my signet. When my wife asked for time to investigate, I refused because I feared losing the crown's favour." Beatrice stared at him in disbelief. "I gave Lady Beatrice authority she had not earned," he continued. "That authority enabled the removal of the apprentices and the distribution of poisoned textiles. I cannot prove that my sister commanded those acts, but I can prove that I chose not to examine the danger she presented." The minister took the chain. "You understand that this admission may cost you your office and place your estates under extended royal supervision." "I do." It was the first truth Richard had offered at genuine cost, but Eleanor felt no rush of forgiveness. His confession corrected his lie. It did not erase what the lie had done. The council recessed until sunrise. Eleanor remained confined, while Beatrice was permitted to stay in guarded family apartments because the decisive documents had been destroyed. Lucy sat beside Eleanor in a small antechamber, rolling her mother's thimble between her fingers. "I am sorry," the girl whispered. "Mrs. Wren took the page because of me. No document is worth your life. But now Lady Beatrice will win." Eleanor watched the thimble turn. 4 tiny dents marked its rim. She had assumed they came from years of use. Then she remembered the 4 holes of the bone button and the 4-part rhythm of the wagon's metal bobbins. "Lucy, did your mother make that thimble?" "No, Gideon gave it to her when I was born. He said it belonged to the workshop." Eleanor held out her hand. With Lucy's permission, she examined it beneath a candle. The dents were not random. They formed the same sequence used to open the hidden door. Inside the thimble, beneath years of tarnish, a tiny fox had been engraved above the letter V. The mark in the payment papers had not represented Beatrice. It identified the workshop that issued the tools. V stood for Vale, the original name of Gideon's master before the Ashcombe family purchased the mill. Eleanor had accused the wrong symbol. That error explained why Beatrice appeared frightened, yet repeatedly escaped direct proof. She was involved, but she was not the patroness. Someone else had used Beatrice's vanity, Richard's guilt, and Eleanor's dismissal to reach the royal family. Lucy frowned. Does that mean Lady Beatrice is innocent? No, it means she is protecting someone more dangerous. Eleanor remembered Beatrice's claim that the crown had forgotten what it owed her family. The old Duchess of Ashcombe had come from the Vale line. Her surviving sister held no title, lived quietly near the palace, and served as a senior lady in the Queen's wardrobe. Aunt Augusta, she possessed access to royal clothing, knowledge of the old workshop code, and a claim of grievance inherited from the Vale family. Beatrice had received Eleanor's authority only that morning, but Augusta had moved through the royal apartments for 20 years. Eleanor now understood the fatal flaw in the conspiracy. The patroness believed Eleanor had never seen the original workshop mark. At sunrise, the council would ask Beatrice, who controlled the Fox and V accounts. If Eleanor accused Augusta directly, Beatrice would deny everything. So Eleanor needed a question whose answer only a conspirator would know. She closed her fingers around the thimble. Lucy, I need you to draw the hidden door exactly as you remember it. There was no fox on the door. I know. That was the lie Eleanor intended to offer. At the hearing, she would claim the surviving evidence bore a crowned fox instead of a plain one. An innocent woman could not correct a mark she had supposedly never seen, and Eleanor knew precisely how to make Beatrice reveal the truth before the entire royal council. At sunrise, Eleanor entered the council chamber with Lucy's thimble hidden inside her closed hand. Beatrice sat beside Aunt Augusta Vale, who wore the serene expression of a woman attending someone else's execution. The older woman had served the Queen's wardrobe for 20 years. No guard had searched her apartments, because no one had imagined that loyalty worn for decades could conceal resentment. The presiding minister called Eleanor forward. You claim that the mark found in the hidden workshop identifies the person who financed the conspiracy? Yes. Eleanor placed the bone button, the remaining green wax, and Lucy's thimble upon a silver tray. The mark is a crowned fox above the letter V. Aunt Augusta remained silent. Beatrice did not. There was no crown. The words escaped before she understood what she had revealed. The entire chamber stilled. Eleanor turned toward her. You told this council you had never entered the underground workshop. Captain Harcourt's men saw the payment symbol only briefly, and every written copy was destroyed. How could you know the fox wore no crown? Beatrice's face emptied of colour. Aunt Augusta rose. My niece is confused. No, Eleanor said. She is frightened of you. She explained that the fox and V-marked tools issued by the old Vale workshop. Augusta had inherited the remaining seals, wax, and pattern codes from her father. When the Ashcombe family purchased the mill, the Vales lost their royal contracts and blamed the crown for their decline. Augusta had spent years rebuilding access. She placed Mrs. Wren in the mill, bribed a physician to declare Gideon dead, and forced imprisoned weavers to reproduce royal patterns. Beatrice supplied the warehouse, the school, the Duke's seal, and Eleanor's golden scissors. In return, Augusta promised her control of the Ashcombe fortune after Eleanor's conviction. The princess's poisoned lace had served two purposes: to destroy a royal marriage alliance and make Eleanor appear responsible for treason. You cannot prove any of this, Augusta said. I do not need to prove it alone. The chamber doors opened. Gideon entered between Captain Harcourt and the royal physician. His hands were bandaged, but his voice was clear. The patroness never removed her gloves, he said. But once, while sealing an order, her sleeve rose. She wore the Vale mourning bracelet, black enamel, with a broken silver fox. Every gaze moved to Augusta's wrist. She pulled her sleeve down too late. Captain Harcourt placed a second object before the council, the red key recovered from the sewing box. Inside its hollow handle, his officers had found a tightly rolled list of payments. Augusta's name did not appear, but the sums corresponded exactly with withdrawals from an account she controlled. Mrs. Wren was captured that afternoon while attempting to board a ship bound for Calais. Faced with the payment record, Gideon's testimony, and Beatrice's fatal correction, she revealed the locations of the remaining poison and named every servant she had bribed. Augusta Vale was stripped of her royal position and committed for trial on charges of conspiracy, abduction, unlawful imprisonment, and attempted murder. Mrs. Wren and the corrupt physician faced prosecution beside her. Beatrice confessed to stealing Eleanor's scissors, planting the imitation lace, and using Richard's seal to remove the apprentices. She insisted she had never known Augusta intended to kill the princess. Eleanor believed her. It did not make her innocent. Beatrice had known Gideon was imprisoned. She had known children were being forced to work. She had remained silent because Augusta promised her Eleanor's position and because she trusted Richard to protect her from every consequence. The Queen ordered Beatrice removed from court. Her allowance was placed in trust to compensate the apprentices, and she was forbidden to exercise authority over any Ashcombe property or charitable institution. Then the minister turned to Richard. The Duke of Ashcombe stood without his chain of office. "My wife warned me," he said before the entire council. "I saw evidence that contradicted the accusation, yet I chose my reputation and my sister's comfort over Eleanor's safety. I gave Beatrice the authority she used to harm those children. I signed away my wife's name because condemning her was easier than admitting I had failed." He withdrew the accusation publicly. He surrendered his royal appointment and accepted extended supervision of the Ashcombe textile holdings. From his private, unentailed property, he established permanent compensation for Gideon and the imprisoned weavers. Eleanor's school was transferred into a trust that neither Richard nor any member of his family could control. Finally, he placed Eleanor's golden scissors upon the council table. These belonged to the Duchess of Ashcombe. So did the work, authority, and honor I allowed another woman to steal. Eleanor took the scissors, but she did not take his hand. Months later, the school reopened under her sole direction. Gideon became master of the new weaving rooms, while Lucy was the first apprentice, permitted to sign her own pattern. Richard lived separately at Ashcombe Hall. He wrote to Eleanor every week, but he never asked her to return. His letters contained reports of restitution, dismissed officials, repaired workers' cottages, and obligations fulfilled. He offered no excuses and demanded no reply. Eleanor answered only once. "Remorse is the beginning of accountability, Richard. It is not the end of mine." One spring morning, he arrived at the school without servants or ducal insignia. He stopped outside the workroom and waited until Eleanor chose to see him. "I have not come to ask for forgiveness," he said. "I came to return the last thing I took." He placed her original cabinet key on the table. Eleanor looked at the man who had once threatened to bargain for her life if she confessed to his sister's crime. He had lost his office, his unquestioned authority, and the certainty that she would remain merely because they were married. "Will you ever come home?" he asked. "I already have." Richard lowered his head. Eleanor did not promise reconciliation. She did not close the door forever, either. "If you wish to know me again," she said, "you will begin as a man asking entrance, not as a duke expecting obedience." He stepped back across the threshold. Eleanor unlocked the workroom herself. Inside, 40 pairs of golden scissors caught the morning light, each belonging to a girl whose hands would never again be used without her consent. Then Eleanor opened the door, not for Richard, not yet, but for the future she had chosen in her own name.